The chamber was unnervingly tense before the first word was even spoken. There was the usual chatter, the shifting of papers, the clearing of throats, but beneath it all, like static under radio waves, there was a crackling awareness that something extraordinary was brewing. The cameras caught every detail. Jasmine Crockett sitting firmly in her chair, her hands clasped neatly, her gaze fixed on the dais with unflinching calm. Across from her sat Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose restless energy betrayed her intention before she even touched her microphone. The moderator, looking exhausted before the night had truly begun, raised his gavel once, then asked a pointed question about fiscal priorities. It should have been straightforward, one of those routine moments where a representative makes their case, cameras roll, and Americans half listen from their living rooms. But within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. Crockett began her measured response, methodically outlining her approach to policy, but Greene pounced almost immediately. "You don't even believe what you're saying." Greene's voice sliced into the chamber like a serrated blade. "You sit there defending a failed agenda, pretending you're serving the people, when in reality you're just covering for corruption." The interruption was loud, intentional, and unapologetic. Greene leaned in, smirk plastered on her face, eager for the reaction her words inevitably triggered. A smattering of claps from her corner, cheers from allies, hollers from the gallery. She basked in it. The gavel came down once, then twice, demanding order. But Jasmine Crockett sat still. She didn't interrupt. She didn't fluster. She waited. Greene threw in another jab, louder this time. "Why don't you admit it? You're reading from a script. You're rehearsed. You're nothing more than a puppet for failed leadership." More jeers, more murmurs. Cameras swiveling from one desk to the other. Viewers tuning in at home could feel it. The slip from debate into chaos. But still, Crockett didn't react. She stayed motionless, calm, her silence growing heavier by the second. And then, when the din reached its peak, Crockett leaned forward. The microphone picked up the deliberate weight of her words, crisp and cutting. "You're out of order." Everything froze. The noise sucked out of the chamber like oxygen from a sealed room. Greene blinked for a second, confusion flickering behind her eyes before rage returned. But the moment had already landed. Gasps rippled across the seats, the kind of audible shock that feeds headlines before reporters even begin typing. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Every time you interrupt, you don't hurt me. You disrespect this room. You disrespect the people who sent us here. You make this chamber smaller whenever you reduce it to shouting and smears instead of service. It might get you headlines, Representative Greene, but it won't get America the solutions they deserve." The truth of it burned through the silence, and the reaction was swift. A wave of applause rolled across the chamber, far outweighing the scattered claps Greene had earned. Even those usually ambivalent leaned forward with raised brows, acknowledging the sharpness of the moment. The moderator banged his gavel but couldn't hide the faint hint of relief in his expression. Someone, finally, had checked the chaos. Greene leaned toward her mic again, unwilling to let the moment pass uncontested. "Oh, don't lecture me about respect. You sit there pretending like you own the high ground, but your whole agenda is corrupt. Don't talk about solutions. You don't have any." But Crockett, calm as ever, simply tilted her head and answered, her tone ice and fire all at once. "I don't need to own the high ground, Representative. I just have to remind you that shouting doesn't build it." Another gasp, another rush of murmurs. The cameras zoomed on Greene's face as her forced smirk flickered, her jaw tightening under the weight of Crockett's sharp rebuke. Social media was already exploding, captions flooding in real time. Crockett shuts Greene down live. And as Greene struggled to compose her comeback, Jasmine Crockett let the room simmer, waiting for the audience at home and in the chamber alike to settle into the recognition that something extraordinary had just happened. A disruptor confronted, chaos silenced, order reclaimed with just 4 words. "You're out of order." The crack of tension that Crockett's words created had not fully healed when Greene leaned back toward her microphone, her smirk returning though thinner this time. She tried to laugh it off, the forced grin twisting into a sneer. "Oh, please," she spat, her southern drawl thick with mockery. "Nobody buys your performance, Jasmine. You stand there pretending to be the voice of reason, but the truth is, you're no different than the circus you pretend to condemn. You care more about sound bites than substance." Her words were pitched to inflame the room. Long pauses inviting. Cheers from her loyalists. Jabs carefully designed for social clips. A few of her allies applauded. Some even jeered mockingly at Crockett. Though the applause was noticeably smaller than before, Jasmine Crockett didn't move right away. She let the sneer, the sarcasm, the hollow claps echo in the chamber for a moment, her expression unwavering. Then, slowly, deliberately, she leaned forward again. It wasn't volume that carried her reply. It was precision. You confuse accountability with performance, Representative Greene, Crockett answered smoothly. And that's because, for you, there is no real difference. All you know how to do is bluster. All you've shown tonight, and so many nights before, is that volume, and chaos are your only weapons. But here's the truth. The louder you yell, the clearer it becomes you're out of your depth. Gasps and murmurs broke out again. The room shifted palpably. Members leaning forward, eyes darting between the two figures, waiting to see if Greene could withstand the sheer force of Crockett's calm rebuke. Greene snapped instantly, trying to cut in. "You call it chaos. I call it courage." Crockett raised her hand with an elegance that demanded silence. The chamber quieted, the sheer confidence in her gesture outweighing Greene's forced interruption. Crockett looked straight at her, and calmly said, "No, courage is standing for the truth. What you're doing is stomping your feet like a child denied candy." The audience erupted. Applause filled the chamber, echoed with laughter in certain corners. Some clapped because they agreed. Others clapped because they recognized the sheer audacity of the line. And while Greene forced a smirk to cover her simmering fury, the cameras caught the flashing irritation in her eyes. Crockett pressed forward, sensing her control cementing itself. "You've made a career out of being disruptive. You cut people off. You shout them down. You pick fights for the sake of attention. You've convinced yourself that interruption is the same as influence. It isn't. All it does is remind people that when substance is called for, you have nothing to give. And tonight, you've proven it more clearly than ever before." Greene spat back quickly, shaking her head furiously. "You think you've shut me down. You've done nothing but put on a smug act. The American people aren't impressed by smug comebacks. They want results, and you've got none." Once again, Greene tried to feed her lines to her supporters, hoping for applause. It came, but it was fractured. Pockets of claps scattered in the midst of a deepening murmur. Everyone could sense the imbalance. Crockett's gaze stayed firm, her voice quieter now, but sharper. Smug is pretending screaming is leadership. Smug is pretending insults are evidence. Smug is acting like shutting out voices and shouting, "Down, truth makes you strong." You call me smug because you ran out of words. Maybe it's time America ran out of patience for your antics. The gasps were audible, the sting undeniable. Applause thundered again, this time rising into waves, that made the moderators bang their gavel for control. But Crockett hadn't raised her voice even once. Her quiet, controlled cadence felt like a hammer, compared to Greene's shrill retorts. For the first time, Greene faltered. She gripped her papers tighter, her smirk slipping. She tried again, her tone shriller, weaker. "People don't want order, they want truth." But Crockett countered instantly. "And yet you confuse the two every time you open your mouth. Truth is order. Truth doesn't need volume. Truth stands even when chaos crashes down around it. And tonight, truth is louder than you." The explosion shook the chamber. Cheers, applause, even stamping feet. The "room gasps" caption wasn't a summary. It was unfolding, again and again. Greene's voice cracked as she tried to bite back, but the contrast was devastating. Crockett, calm and steady. Greene, loud and unraveling. Cameras zoomed on Greene's face as sweat glistened faintly. At her hairline, Crockett, hands folded neatly on the desk, waited calmly as though the match was hers before it was even called. By now, the air inside the chamber was thick, the kind of tension that made every word and pause feel like a stone dropped into a pond. Greene's interruptions had grown sharper, her volume louder, but the more she escalated, the more obvious. It became that Jasmine Crockett had seized control of the narrative. The contrast couldn't be clearer. One side loud but scattered, the other precise and confident dot. Still, Greene wasn't ready to retreat. Her microphone screeched faintly as she leaned even closer, frustration visible in the tight lines of her face. "Don't sit there acting like you're some paragon of truth and dignity," Greene snapped, her tone teetering on shrill. "You've spent your career working for elites while dressing it up as service for the people. You lecture me on order, but you bend over backwards for the same leaders who've ruined this country's credibility. You are the very definition of corruption hiding in plain sight." Her words hung sharp, provoking instant reactions. Some booed, others clapped, and for a moment the noise swelled into unfiltered chaos, exactly the atmosphere Greene thrived in. The moderators slammed, gavels demanding order, their voices drowned out by competing shouts in the hall. To her allies, this was Greene at her best. Fiery, uncompromising, unrelenting dot. But the camera cut back to Crockett. Calm, still, patient, as if waiting for the waves to crash, knowing the tide always recedes. When she finally lifted her microphone, the silence returned almost instinctively. "Personal attacks," Crockett began, her voice low, steady, deliberate. "That's where you always run to when the pressure builds. You think by calling me names, by painting me as something I'm not, you can dodge the reality staring you in the face. But Representative Greene, every American watching tonight, knows the truth. They can tell the difference between noise and leadership, and reminding them of that difference is why I'm here." Applause thundered across the chamber, spilling over like a dam breaking. Greene shifted in her chair, forcing her face into a smirk again, but the tension in her jaw betrayed the cracks forming beneath the surface. Crockett's voice sharpened, slicing calmly into the heart of her adversary's argument. "You can accuse me of corruption. You can shout, you can sneer, you can try every insult in your arsenal. But, at some point, you'll need to do what you still haven't done tonight. Answer a single question with actual substance. Until then, all you are is proof that politics can sink to chaos if we let it." A collective gasp filled the room, instantly amplified across social feeds with captions. "Crockett, answer one question with substance." Greene struck back immediately, the words tumbling out with uncontrolled heat. "Don't act like you're above me, Jasmine. You don't get to pretend you're better just because you can put on a polished act and deliver lines rehearsed for applause. You sharpen your tone to sound clever, but you're just as guilty as the rest of them." But Crockett didn't raise her volume to match. Instead, she leaned just slightly forward, her eyes unwavering, her voice a knife wrapped in velvet. "Polished act? Rehearsed lines? Representative, if truth sounds polished, maybe it's because chaos has spoiled your ears. If composure sounds rehearsed, maybe it's because you've forgotten what real leadership even looks like." The audience erupted again, some laughing openly, others clapping so furiously the cameras shook. A chant of "Order, order," began, echoing from Crockett's side of the chamber, half in jest, half in awe, before gavels once again tried to contain the storm dot. Greene tried to retort, her voice rising, pushing back harder. "Don't patronize me with your fake dignity. People don't want sweet words. They want someone to fight." And Crockett answered, her delivery crystalline. "Fighting doesn't mean shouting. Fighting means standing for truth even when it's uncomfortable. Fighting means refusing to drown this chamber in noise because the American people deserve better. Fighting means knowing when to stop performing and start leading. If you can't grasp that difference, Representative Greene, then you're not fighting for the people. You're fighting for yourself. Applause, gasps, nods across the chamber, even from those who weren't aligned with Crockett politically. The pure force of her rhetoric landed like waves crashing against stone, undeniable no matter the seat you occupied. The hashtags multiplied online, new ones trending, hash out of order moment, hash Crockett TV screen, hash room gasps, clips of her cool delivery. Lined up against Greene's flustered shouting spread second by second. Greene clenched her teeth, trying desperately to cut in, but the shift was unmistakable. Jasmine Crockett had turned repeated interruptions into definitive proof of chaos, and the audience, the moderators, even allies of Greene, could see it clearly. Crockett leaned back in her chair then, her point carved into the air. All around her, a room that had felt divided now tilted sharply in her favor. Marjorie Taylor Greene reached for her mic again, but the tone had changed. The audience wasn't hungry to hear her next bite. They wanted the woman who had just exposed Imaki's entire act. And whether Greene liked it or not, it wasn't her performance America would remember from this night. It would be the moment she was reminded, in front of millions watching, that she was, in fact, out of order. By this point, the rhythm of the confrontation had shifted so dramatically that everyone in the room knew it. Jasmine Crockett had commanded the chamber with precision and calm, while Marjorie Taylor Greene had been reduced to louder and louder outbursts, her arguments retreating further into personal jabs and hollow accusations. Yet, true to form, Greene refused to fade. Leaning forward, her voice rising higher than ever before, she launched into a heated rant. The American people don't want polished speeches, Jasmine. They don't want lectures from people like you, who pretend to be elite intellectuals while families suffer outside this chamber. You think order is some kind of victory? No. Order is silence. Order means covering up the truth while Americans lose their jobs, their security, their voices. You are just another voice of corruption, another pawn in a broken game, she slammed, her papers down for emphasis, her words echoing off the walls. Some in the chamber cheered defiantly, her most loyal supporters clapping nervously as if trying to restore momentum. But the applause was scattered, splintered, drowned out quickly by the growing murmurs of frustration from others who had heard enough. Crockett remained poised, her expression steady as stone. When she leaned into her microphone, her words carried the exact opposite energy of Greene's rant. Calm, deliberate, but devastating in their clarity. Representative Greene, she began, her tone cutting without ever needing volume. You confuse chaos with courage, and you confuse noise with truth. The American people don't need yelling contests. They don't need someone breaking every rule of order and then claiming that chaos is honesty. What they need are leaders who will speak clearly, act responsibly, and fight for solutions. What they don't need, what they're tired of, is exactly what you've put on display tonight. The audience gasped audibly. The contrast was glaring. Greene's voice, nearly trembling with volume and fury, against Crockett's voice, controlled, sharp, immovable. Greene tried to force a rebuttal immediately. You don't get to tell me what the American people want. They sent me here to fight, and that's what I'm doing. But Crockett was ready. Her eyes never dropped, her voice steady and slicing like a scalpel. No, fighting is standing tall for the truth. Fighting is protecting those who sent us here with solutions, not sound bites. Fighting is understanding that respecting order doesn't mean silencing truth. It means amplifying it by removing the chaos that hides it. And all you've done tonight, Representative Greene, is prove that your fight isn't for the American people. It's for your own spotlight. The chamber trembled again, applause swelling, louder and more sustained than before. Cameras captured, shot after shot. Greene's clenched jaw, her hands gripping the papers in front of her, contrasted with Crockett's calm composure, her measured tone slicing through the chaos like a gavel of its own dot. Desperation colored Greene's face as she pushed louder, nearly shouting into the microphone. "You're just scared of real voices. You're scared of someone who isn't afraid to say the truth out loud. Weak leaders like you want to control everything, but sooner or later, the American people will realize you're the fraud, not me." But this time, many in the audience groaned, tired of the repetition, tired of the theatrics. The chant that began was unexpected but telling. From one side of the room, voices rose in unison. "Out of order! Out of order!" Within seconds, it spread, filling the gallery as spectators repeated the chant like a chorus aimed directly at Greene. The moderators banged their gavels desperately, but the chant continued. "Out of order! Out of order!" Greene's voice faltered, her words drowned beneath the crescendo. Her smirk had vanished entirely, her complexion betraying a mix of anger and embarrassment. Cameras zoomed in on her, freezing the image of a once dominant voice cornered by the very chaos she had tried to unleash. And then, Crockett leaned once more to the microphone, delivering the knockout line. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It came in cool and sure, and with each syllable the chamber hushed to listen. "You accuse me of being afraid of voices. No. I'm afraid of the damage done when those voices are raised only to distract, only to divide, only to derail. But I'm not afraid of saying this clearly tonight, for America and for this chamber. Representative Greene, you are not leading. You are out of order, and history will remember you that way." The chamber erupted. Gasps, cheers, applause, chants, the kind of eruption that washed over everything else like a tidal wave. Greene sat motionless, her papers untouched now, her smirk gone, her microphone silent. For the first time all evening she chose not to respond. Because she couldn't, and everyone in the room knew it. Jasmine Crockett had landed the knockout America would remember. The noise that erupted after Crockett's knockout line thundered through the chamber like a tidal wave crashing against stone. Moderators pounded their gavels in vain, their voices drowned out by the chant rising from the gallery. "Out of order! Out of order!" The words echoed against the ornate walls, rising to the ceiling and shaking the floor with a rumble of history being written in real time. Greene sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white against the papers she still gripped. Cameras zoomed in mercilessly, capturing the rare moment where the perpetual smirk and unflinching bravado had cracked, replaced with taut silence. She opened her mouth once, as if to form a reply, but quickly pressed her lips together, each second amplifying the sense that her arsenal had been depleted. Crockett, in contrast, sat taller, shoulders squared, her hands folded calmly on the desk. It wasn't arrogance. Her posture radiated something else: authority, composure, victory without triumphalism. When the chants began to die down, she leaned toward her microphone again, her tone steady, her eyes burning with intensity. "Order is not silence," she declared. "Order is respect. Order is accountability. Order is knowing when to pause and actually listen to the people who sent us here. But what we've seen tonight, what Americans have seen too many times, is the replacement of order with noise, with disruption, with endless insults that do nothing to help struggling families in their homes across this nation." A murmur of agreement rose in waves before swelling into applause again. Social media exploded with captions pulled from her words. "Order is not silence, Jasmine Crockett." The line appeared instantly under trending hashtags, clips being spliced and shared across every major platform at lightning speed. Crockett pressed on. "This chamber is not a stage for personal feuds. It's not a stage for shouting matches designed to make 5-second clips on cable networks. It's supposed to be a place where we carry the voices of Americans who want solutions, not chaos. And, Madam Moderator, If all Representative Greene can bring is interruptions and distractions, then she is not serving her district, and she is not serving her country. Once again, she is out of order. The room gasped loudly, the third time, in the night that Crockett's words elicited that collective reaction. It wasn't just sharp, it was damning, final, the kind of rebuke that everyone listening knew could not easily be walked back. Greene tried to lean forward again, her hand gripping the microphone, but she stayed frozen, her gaze simmering, her lips unmoving. The tension in her jaw betrayed her fury, but there was no comeback strong enough to reverse what had already occurred. Crockett had framed her completely, locked her in a corner where every attempted outburst only confirmed the truth of Jasmine's accusations. One voice rose from the gallery. "That's leadership." Others followed, shouts of "finally" and "tell it," resounding until they folded back into unified applause. Even members across the aisle who normally kept themselves neutral found themselves nodding in reluctant acknowledgement. Crockett allowed the noise to crest, then shifted her tone softer, not less commanding but more personal. "I don't sit here tonight to win applause. I sit here because every day Americans wake up looking for hope that their voices matter more than the headlines. They want to know that when they send us into this chamber, we will not waste their trust on childish outbursts meant to score points. They want representatives, not performers. They want leaders, not screamers. And tonight, at least in this room, they deserve to know the difference." A woman in the front gallery wiped away a tear as the camera caught her face. Reporters typed desperately, composing narratives with headlines already crystal clear. Crockett defines the difference between leadership and chaos. J.D. Vance, seated in the chamber's rear corner, nodded approvingly, his eyes holding the same recognition as millions across the nation. This wasn't just a debate exchange. It was a cultural moment, one destined to be replayed again and again. Crockett finished with brutal simplicity. When this replay is watched tomorrow, when families share the clips on their phones, the story won't be about interruptions. The story will be about accountability. And accountability. Representative Greene just checked you tonight. The ET room exploded again, chants rising louder, reporters whispering urgently, headlines practically writing themselves. Gasps was no longer hyperbole. It was history unfolding, and America was bearing witness. The chaos had ended, replaced by a rare kind of silence that seemed almost sacred inside the chamber. On one side of the table sat Marjorie Taylor Greene, usually brimming with fire, but now still, her papers untouched, her face held in a forced mask of calm. On the other sat Jasmine Crockett, composed, steady, unshaken. The chant that had swept through the room had faded, the gavel strikes had ceased, and all eyes were fixed on the undeniable contrast. Crockett leaned forward one final time. Her voice was even, not raised, but carried the weight of authority that no volume could equal. "We take an oath when we walk into this chamber," she said. "That oath is not to ourselves, not to sound bites, not to the pursuit of personal attention. That oath is to the American people. And when that oath is broken, when this space is turned into a stage for constant disruption, someone has to say what has been swallowed too often in silence. Enough." The word echoed sharply, bouncing off walls heavy with history. Murmurs rippled through the audience, some nodding, others clapping, and within seconds the sound swelled again. For the final time that evening, the spotlight fixed on Jasmine Crockett as the chamber reacted with unrestrained clarity. Greene remained motionless. She tried to raise her hand, to lean closer to her microphone, but stopped. Even she seemed aware that another interruption would only reaffirm every word Crockett had spoken. The silence, more than anything, was the admission no rhetoric could obscure. Crockett ended with a simple truth. Representative Greene, when history remembers this moment, it will not remember the noise. It will remember order reclaimed, and it will remember that tonight, in this chamber, accountability finally spoke louder than interruption. The explosion of applause that followed was overwhelming. Reporters scrambled, headlines typed in bold. Crockett checks Greene. You're out of order. Room gasps. Across the nation, millions replayed the clip, their screens glowing with one clear verdict, the line that silenced chaos and roared into history.